Hi everybody, my name is Kirsten Lovett, and today I'm going to be talking about water speaking to us. Let me just go through some things. First, tell you a couple housekeeping things. Um, First off, you're going to see some Palo Santo smoking here, and I may need to get up, take a break periodically and relight it. So if you bear with me while I do that occasionally throughout this process, you'll see the Palo Santo hopefully staying lit. So I'm going to put that down here. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for being here live. Before I start, I wanted to let you know that I'll be looking down a lot at my notes, so I will try to get your comments and or questions after the presentation. So feel free, leave comments, questions, whatever. I will look at them definitely throughout the day today. And, excuse me, some of the Palo Santo will occasionally do these little ashes. I have to wave them around. So the other thing is, I also wanted to mention that there will be a raffle. I'm raffling off a free session with me, and the raffle will be for a free 30-minute session where I can help you with your connection with your helping spirits, or with sacred tobacco if you choose to, learn more about that, or if you already have a practice with that, nature spirits, earth healing, that sort of thing. So to enter the raffle today, all you need to do is watch live or the replay. And by the way, for the replay, I will, after this is over, I will post the replay link. But to enter the raffle, all you need to do is watch live today or the replay, make a comment, and sign up for the free gift, which I will post afterwards, and you will be entered into the raffle. And I'll announce the winner of the raffle later on this week, so you will know who won. So before I start, I will just call in some helping spirits here, and of course I'm going to be drinking my water throughout today. Okay. Okay, so that was a little bit of a jaguar whistle song, so I like to do that to get started and get centered. So thank you all for joining me. So, while many people have gifts like being able to psychically hear, feel, or see energies in nature, some people need to learn how to apply those gifts in order to live harmoniously with their environment and with themselves. Many of us in this current society know of shamanic concepts, and maybe we travel to other cultures to renew a forgotten relationship we had with nature within our own ancestry. All of this is good and necessary. But then we come home to our current over-modernized culture. And I say over-modernized because I love technology, but a little goes a long way. And we feel out of balance. That's because the culture is out of balance. And how we interact with the earth is out of balance. So the indigenous cultures that still survive, they have been teaching this to those who will listen. I enjoy showing people how to harmonize, listen, communicate, and have a relationship with nature. So today, here are the 3 things we will look at. 1, connecting with your local land and water spirits. 2, Many nature spirit communications can occur with a person near a body of water. And 3, noticing a synchronistic occurrence in nature when something important happens, when you get a message. So those are the 3 things today. And I have to, like I said, I have to periodically keep this lit. So just bear with me a minute. And we have our Palo Santo doing its thing here. There we go. Normally I let it burn out by itself, but sometimes, for sake of time, we have to... Generally, you want to let Palo Santo just burn out by itself, just as a little tip there. So you saw me blow it out, and I generally try not to do that. So nature has its own consciousness. This is one of the things I've learned from traveling to sacred sites. For a long time, I thought I had to go to these faraway places to experience the refined energy. But I was wrong. It is possible to cultivate a relationship with nature in your own backyard or neighborhood. So I've always been drawn to places with water. Many people enjoy the relaxing qualities of the beach or lakes, so that's a given. On a psychic communication level, I have found that nature spirits will communicate if there's a sacred water source nearby. So it's no coincidence that on my past travels, the first place I remember seeing was a body of water. When I first arrived in Paris, for example, I walked to the Seine River. That was the first place I saw. The first picture when I went to Peru was of the Pacific Ocean. And that was actually from inside of a car. At home, I walk daily here in Florida to a freshwater pond with many animals and plants. So I'm going to tell you about that in a sec. So when they say water is life, this is more than just words. For thousands of years, medicine men and women have worshipped water throughout history, and currently too, and they've tended to it not only as a physical life-giving essence, but a spiritual being. So I've had many mystical and spiritual experiences around water that I will probably never understand. Maybe I will someday. But however, I will talk about some of these experiences specifically in an attempt to convey the principles and healing qualities of the spiritual aspects of water. So these are going to be some specific stories about some of my work with water and offerings. One of the ways I keep a spiritual dialogue between myself and nature is to give offerings on a regular basis. The fact that I'm always drawn to give them near a body of water is significant and a regular theme. Giving offerings to water allows me to synthesize and honor both the great spiritual beings from my initiated tradition, as well as build a deeper relationship with the local land I live on. Those are 2 different things. I also feel a deeper connection with the healed ancestors of my genetic history, a 3rd thing. So that's a 3rd geographical place. So about 5 years ago, Marissa Lovett advised me of a way that I could honor my own genetic ancestors through offerings to places in nature. On my daily walks to these same places outside, I have designated either a tree or a bush or a spot near the water as a place for each healed ancestor that I am familiar with at this time. So, to backtrack about some of the process leading up to that point, I've received much information about my healed genetic ancestors through shamanic journeys, dreams, research, of course, that was given to me, praying with sacred tobacco, which has been a huge help. But this took time as well to get the information, of course. For example, when we finished our initiation in Peru, this is like eight or 9 years ago, we were instructed to go to a water source when we came home back from the trip, when I returned home here to Florida, to solidify the energetic and spiritual healing process that we had received in Peru. So I chose to make a trip to Warm Mineral Springs, which is not far from here. It's located about 45 minutes from where I live. So in an attempt to weave in some of the nature spirits from my initiated tradition, as well as the spirits that come from the land I live on. I have added offerings to them as well. So I offer to the land I live on, Florida, to the healed ancestral spirits from the UK and Europe, which are where most of my ancestors are from, genetically. And then and it's those healed ancestors that I'm talking about. And then my initiated tradition, which is Peru. So that's like 3 different areas. And this is what I've been doing, tending to, and I hope others can do something similar to this, because it's really been beneficial. So I've gotten to the point now where I feel that this process, and this place in particular where I leave the offerings, and the act of leaving offerings at these areas, whether it's a tree or a spot, an area with a bush, or the water itself, I feel like these are all my friends. And if I don't see these friends after a few days, I miss them. And this is just one tiny aspect of the benefits of the relationship of what I call this bonding with the land, bonding with the spirits of the land and the spirits of the water. And leaving offerings, weaving in one's own healed ancestors, as well as honoring any traditions that you might have been taught that are not from the land you live on. As well as, if you're fortunate enough to be of indigenous, living on the land that is, an indigenous land to you, and that's a wonderful thing. That's obviously you already have a tradition, but this is also a message for people who maybe have a tradition from another place, and they're trying to weave in something from where they live now. There's people who are trying to learn on their own. There's all sorts of varieties of different kinds of people that come from different backgrounds and have different kinds of knowledge. So it's kind of the offerings in general kind of work pretty well with most different kinds of traditions, I'll just call them. So just a moment here, if you don't mind me relighting the Palo Santo here. Keep the fires burning, as they say. It's always good to have that. Okay, that should do it. A little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to tell you a little bit about the mystical experiences near water where these offerings were given. So I was walking the other day towards one of the outside spots where there's several palm trees encircled near a reservoir. It's actually a freshwater pond. So I gasped when I saw a long black snake. Now when I say long black snake, I'm not talking about a python or anything like that. This is Florida, so there are varieties of snakes. But this was a tiny, it was like a little garden type snake. And it was curled up in the middle of the shade of the palm trees. It didn't, it was a good 3-4 feet away from me. So I had some initial fear when I first saw it, because I grew up in the suburbs, so I'm not used to snakes. But the fear quickly dissipated into kind of a fascination for a brief moment at how calm the snake was, and he made me feel calm too. And he had his head looking up to the sky, and he had his little tongue out as if he was tasting the wind. And he just was kind of in his own space, He almost seemed very relaxed. And I have a theory about what spirit it might have been at this particular spot with this snake in mind, because of the location of what kinds of nature offerings that I usually place there. This is one of the designated spots. But more importantly, while I try to understand the meaning of what took place, I also see this occurrence as a big affirmation of the relationship I've developed with the spirits of the land, and likewise in turn that I'm trying to demonstrate through, that you guys can do this too, of course. Anyone can. Therefore, I want to emphasize that these special occurrences can happen to anyone who makes regular offerings. So a couple of weeks ago, I was making offerings to a healed ancestor at a different spot, a usual designated spot next to the water. And as I was praying, I saw and sensed kind of out of my peripheral vision a bubbling in the water. And following the bubbling, a little head popped out of the water, revealing it was a turtle. And turtles occasionally hang out around here. He kept his head above the water for a few seconds as I felt this very strong presence. And a week later, so fast forward a week later, I went on a shamanic journey. So I was in my house at this point, and it was one that Marissa Lovett was, she was moderating it. So I'm kind of in a different space now. I'm in my home, I'm shamanic journeying, and I'm asking about the spirits of this local land here where I live. On the journey, I saw a turtle in the shamanic state of consciousness. The turtle, he didn't say much, but I kept asking him. I said, what would you like me to know? What should I do? And finally he said, T-A-G-T, turtles are good teachers, which I thought was really cute and very profound, actually. Maybe I'll come back to that subject again in a future webinar. So just today, after a few weeks have gone by since first seeing the turtle at that time, I was out, for my walk, and I thought maybe I wouldn't be seeing the turtle again. So I went to where this same spot where I saw him the first time, and I left an offering to this particular healed ancestor spirit associated with that spot. And this time I saw the turtle slowly swimming along the shore or edge of the pond. So that was a nice affirmation. So before I go into the next story, the relight, this Palo Santo is doing good, but it needs regular upkeep. Okay. So this next story is a shamanic journey experience. So again, I was in my home at that time. So on a shamanic journey, I started in my journey state at an actual place that's not far from my home. It was a pine tree. It is a pine tree. And it's actually a little bit further away from the place I've been talking about. So I didn't really know where to go in my shamanic state of consciousness. I mean, sometimes I try to start a journey with kind of a goal in mind, even though I don't know exactly what's going to happen. But this time I didn't have anything in mind. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. So I kind of just let them kind of guide me. So I was on the journey in the shamanic state of consciousness, and all of a sudden I was at the library, which is not far from where this particular pine tree is. And the guides in the shamanic state of consciousness, they were showing me a shelf of books, and they kept saying water rituals of pre-Columbian Florida. And after that, the guide said that finding out these practices would help me feel less powerless over climate change. And it would also help me understand why I chose to be in Florida. And they also reminded me of my past life in Florida 1,000 years ago, as well as my current genetic ancestral talent, which, just was born into that, for water spirits, and how we can heal our lost ways by reconnecting with the spirit of water. So this journey really helped me understand some questions that I've had about where to go next at the time in my water webinar research, as well as why. And what's interesting about this is I did some of the research on the pre-Columbian, it was actually about Crystal River, Florida. I didn't include it in today's presentation, but I will most likely present that at a future webinar. So, but it's interesting because that's a place that's not far from here as well. That's actually a couple hours. But if some of you might already know Crystal River Archaeological Site, it's a very important pre-Columbian ancestral. It's also a national park, part of a national park, but it's a very important sacred site in the state. So, what it's like to dialogue with the nature spirits about offerings and or prayers. One of the things I have experimented with is praying with sacred tobacco and my medicine bottle regarding offerings or prayers for the land I live on right now. So one helping spirit in particular, and she's associated with the medicine bottle, she's particularly helpful in aiding healing for the water. And this has been a more recent development. Like a year ago, I think I knew who she was, but I wasn't really doing this specific thing I'm going to tell you about. So sometimes when I'm praying with the Misa, this particular helping spirit, she'll direct me to which bodies of water need her help, so I know where to direct my prayers. For example, I might know that the Gulf of Mexico needs prayers, but then she will, through the medicine bundle, she'll ask me to add other waterways. She'll say, Gulf of Mexico and connecting waterways, so that covers kind of the major body of water, and then, if you kind of visualize it, go with the prayers going in through, I'm just using where I live as an example, going in through the rivers and the bays and the rivers, and then we have Lake Okeechobee as another massive, massive lake in the middle of the lower half of the state. And then she has me go to the Atlantic and the Arctic and then the Pacific and various other places. And so she'll ask me to add as needed, She's very good at helping me understand some of the ancient spirits that might be associated with water in my local area here in Florida, even though this particular helping spirit comes from Peru, so she, you wouldn't think that she would know, but a lot of these deities will work together, and helping spirits will work together. And in particular, I heard her say that some of the research I was reading about past native cultures, like the Crystal River research I was telling you about, and their spiritual reverence for nature was directed to my attention because of her working with the local land spirits here, local water spirits here. And this happens often where a helping spirit or deity will, from either an initiated tradition or sometimes a genetic ancestor, maybe in your family, that you may or may not know about, especially if they're a healed ancestor, they will work with another local nature spirit where you live. It's not just limited to that, so it could happen in another location too. So it's sometimes difficult, at least for me, to determine who's talking to who, and until I kind of do things a few times. So I just try to do what they tell me to do until they let me know why later. And that's usually, I'm sure a lot of you have experience with dealing with helping spirits where, you don't really know why you're doing something. They give you this information, it doesn't make sense. It's like if you have a jigsaw puzzle and you're given like the outer borders of the jigsaw, and they give you a couple middle pieces and they're like, okay, just fill it out, and then later you see, oh, now I see the picture, okay, but that happens after you've done all the work. So without knowing what it is they want you to do. And that can be, for people like I'm like this, some people don't mind that. I've grown accustomed to it, but it's still sometimes hard because we live, in a very mental culture where, for those of us who like having a curriculum ahead of us, knowing what we're going to do on occasion, sometimes that can be a little difficult. So next I'm going to tell you about the intersection of nature spirits from the local land and maybe other ancestral lineages. So this one's about a great egret. It's like a white bird that's it's got these nice wings. So after leaving offerings at the spot near the spring where I usually pray to the ancestors, and this particular spot was from the Norse tradition, a great egret flew over to within 10 feet where I was standing. So after I left an offering saying thank you, I heard a voice say, "Make a wish." And I did so. I went ahead and made a wish, and then I saw the egret, the great egret, snap food into its beak and eat it. I've learned that this is always a sign of abundance from animal divination practices I learned from Marissa Lovett. The reason this is special in this particular instance is it's the first time I actually heard a voice in my right ear telling me to do something, and then having nature respond almost immediately with kind of a gesture of reciprocity. And it was a very profound step, which is why I wanted to kind of share it today. So I could postulate that the spirits of the land, Florida, in this case Florida, and the water, are in conversation with my healed genetic ancestors at that particular spot. That's one possibility. I also know that a helping spirit from my initiated tradition in Peru likes to converse with one of my genetic ancestral helping spirits from the Norse tradition. So they seem to have lightning in common, these two particular healed spirits. And I assume also water, possibly wind. So how I figured this out was when I would leave offerings to the Norse ancestors from my family, the healed ancestors, I would sometimes accidentally say the Andean helping spirit name by accident right after I would say the Norse genetic ancestor name. So that's how I kind of deduced that, oh, they must have something in common on a vibrational and a lineage kind of a similarity maybe in patterns perhaps. So if we are multidimensional beings, which a lot of people talk about that in both shamanic circles and even non-shamanic circles, so if we have many dimensions to our being, then the possibilities and validity of past lives becomes very real. That's a possible option. And if that is so, then I could possibly conclude that the reason I'm able to hear and receive information and sometimes converse with nature beings on the land I was never born on. I'm not from Florida. I didn't come into the world in Florida. Is perhaps because of past lives, maybe. Another possibility is that by leaving offerings on the land I was not born on, I have solidified a connection to healing the disconnect that my own genetic ancestors from the past, that the disconnect that happened when they left their own land to come over, in this case, like a lot of people that came over to America. Maybe the disconnect, well, actually, I know the disconnect happened with the land before they even came over here, so for a lot of them. And maybe the spirits of the land here in Florida, see that I'm trying to make a relationship with them, and I think this is the most likely as well. And they see that I'm trying to make a relationship with them, and so they respond. And this is a wonderful thing that's not just limited to me or anyone else. I think everybody, if they put in the time, they'll notice that this will happen. So, as a side note, I want to mention also, there might be, when you start doing this, which I hope you will, there's a tendency to maybe, and I understand this because I'm like this too, especially if you're feeling, kind of urgent about something, but if you might want to expect immediate response when you first start leaving offerings, but it may not happen that quickly where you get a response. Many weeks and months went by before I started to feel a connection with the spirits in my local land. I had to just keep doing it. For example, I'm currently on my 5th year of doing this, and I just now received some information about the possible name of some of the local land spirits, or I kind of said that the wrong way. The possible name of one of the cultures that I think they want me to look into, which is, they mentioned Safety Harbor, which, I kind of knew that was an area, a culture that they wanted me to look at. One more break here for a little bit. More Palo Santo. So, and I'm just... So, getting back to the relationship, when we talk about offerings in the relationship, it's just like when you leave offerings, it's like any relationship where you are trying to build a rapport or trust. Some people would say it's not good to anthropomorphize everything, but I think if you think about a relationship with a person, like a complete stranger on the street, or maybe that's not a great example, a complete stranger that you meet at, let's say, some kind of meeting or something, you wouldn't just go up to them and yank at them and say, hey, listen to me, and, most people wouldn't. So if you look at this relationship as kind of like a slow kind of establishing, by leaving the offerings, you're kind of saying hello, and you're kind of letting them know that you honor them, that you thank them for being here, and thank for them for all the wisdom that's in the land as well, and the water, of course. So our current culture, and I think we're getting better about this, but I mean, up until now, our current culture teaches us erroneous concepts about how to relate to nature, like expecting immediate healing and gratification without first considering the reciprocal dynamics of forging a respectful relationship with the spirits of nature. So I encourage everyone, when you start this process, just keep going. And even if it feels like nothing is happening right away, it might be kind of frustrating at first, but you never know. Maybe you'll get off to a great start. You'll really start, leaving offerings at a spot that you like, and you'll get immediate feedback. You never know. So I'm getting ready to wrap it up here, but I wanted to read one last story. After reading on an internet group a post, this wasn't our group, by the way, this is a different group, a post about how nature spirits don't care about us. This person had said, well, the nature spirits, they don't care about us. So I was kind of like thinking about that, and I didn't really like that. And I was primed on my daily walk for a message from the pond. So I read this at my house or my apartment, and right before I was heading out the door. So I went up to the freshwater pond where I leave the offerings, and I saw a little blue egret fly in, actually, after I made an offering to the Norse branch again of healed ancestors, as well as the spirits of this land of Florida. And I saw the bird grab a small fish and eat it. And this was a sign of prosperity, of course, for him, for the bird, and also made me feel like the health of the pond was good, and also that not only the physical health of the pond, but the spiritual energy of the pond was good, and the land spirits and water spirits seemed pretty happy at that point. So only after this particular thing happened did I hear the following in my ear: your daily offerings of love to this pond are in the soil and silt of the water, so you are part of that love. And I want to give that quote to you guys too. If you think of this process and feel this process when you leave offerings, that when you do this, if you can just picture your offerings to this water, you're becoming part of the soil and silt in the water. If you can just picture that, and you're a part of that love, so that it gets reflected back to you, and it's kind of like you would expect a current, like the water flowing back and forth, like the waves coming in, going out. So when you leave offerings, you're sending your love into the water, and you'll get it back as well. But it's, you have to want to make that initial pulse to reach out as a friend to these spirits of water, as if you were trying to meet a new friend. So in conclusion, I chose these particular stories to tell you guys about today in order to encourage everyone to entertain the possibilities of a relationship with nature spirits like water. And a lot of you already have nature spirits that you relate to, and water spirits. So I hope it's been helpful, and will encourage you to deepen your relationship with water as well, and to maybe start an offerings practice. I really appreciate all of you guys listening today, and just thank you for bearing with me with the lighting of the Palo Santo, and I had to take a few water breaks, and I'm sorry I couldn't get to your comments right now, but I will go ahead and wrap this up. I think what I'll do is I'll do one more song so we can kind of get back into our everyday body practices here. and they just told me to tell you that song I just did was to thank them for helping me to communicate to you guys. So I always, it's like the Native Americans say, we are a hollow bone. So, you know, I wanted to make sure you know that when I communicate these things to you, I always ask beforehand to my helping spirits and my medicine bundle, please help me to communicate what it is you want me to communicate to everyone today. So I was just now thanking them, and I thank all of you for listening, and I hope it was fun. And don't forget to enter the raffle. Okay, I'll post the link for the replay in just a moment. So thanks a lot, and have a great week and weekend.